Okay, hi everyone. Really nice to see you all. My name is Harriet Oughton, and I'm a full-time software developer Monday to Friday at Zivio because I love to code. And I'm a weekend and evening part-time batch manager on Oughton's web development bootcamp because I love to self-punish. A little context before we get into it. Before I retrained on a coding bootcamp, I spent 10 years as a classroom teacher and musician, so I think it's safe to say I like an audience. I wanted to pitch a talk for a tech conference, and the amazing Emily Samp from the Women and Non-Binary Ruby group offered to help me come up with a topic. Part of her advice was, what is the one thing you have knowledge, experience, and access to that other people don't have? My answer? A huge network of early career developers. Through teaching and managing the part-time course at Oughton, I estimate I've been involved in some way with around 250 students' coding journeys as early career developers. In fact, I've spotted at least one of them in the audience today, so maybe if you'd like to give him like an off-the-cuff coding test in the break, then you'll see my efficacy as a teacher. Many of these students I've taught then become teachers for us in their first few years in professional roles, so I'm able to chat with them frequently and triangulate their most common experiences. I'm here today to pass on those experiences to you in the hope of achieving two goals. If you're an early career developer yourself, it can be easy to feel inadequate, particularly in a small team, as Ruby teams often seem to be, where maybe you are the least experienced member, as I was for the first year of my career. However, know from this that you're not alone. You'll be meeting some of these challenges for the very first time, just like everyone else, and maybe you'll take away some tips and tricks too from this for tackling them. If you're a more experienced developer, we know that the learning curve is steep, and it can be so easy to forget our olden day anxious feelings around writing our first tests, pushing our first PRs, and choosing a rad GitHub username. If you already have an early career developer at your company, hopefully this will serve as a reminder to you of the things that they are very new to, with some tips to help them get comfy quickly. If you do not have an early career developer at your company, you're doing it wrong. Please see me after this session for a stern talking to. And while we're at it, a list of some of the most wonderful and eager early career developers that are entering the industry and really deserve a first chance. I'm joking about the stern talking to, but I would be happy to give recommendations of UK-based bootcamp graduates who are looking for positions. And hopefully this talk will reassure you that it's very easy to get them settled and making high-quality contributions quickly. By the way, I know a bunch of bootcamp grads, but what follows could be the experiences of anyone who has spent a good chunk of time, typically around a year minimum, give or take, learning the fundamentals of software development and has built themselves a nice-looking app or two at home. We meet them now as they are in the first few months of their first professional role. With that in mind, let's receive some postcards from early career developers. Setting up my environment was both as draining and as confidence-crushing as going for a jog with Usain Bolt. Unfortunately, first day setup is the baptism of fire that no one asked for. You're given a lot of complicated, obscure code that you will mostly run once and then not have to grapple with again until you start somewhere new. This is probably akin to a junior doctor on their first day being met with a rare accident and having to stitch all 4 of a patient's limbs back on. No one else on duty can remember the limbs class, though, so the junior has to follow a handbook written a long time ago with a bunch of terminology they don't understand and have their patient up and about by tea time. Early career developers, don't panic if you don't understand every command you run as part of setup. At the start, just follow the instructions one step at a time and be thankful that no one's limbs depend on it. Although you may not use these commands regularly going forwards, you will develop more familiarity with how everything you've set up fits together as you start to work on the software. And you can always write things down during this and research them later on down the line when you feel a bit more confident. Concentrate on getting everything working smoothly, quickly, and in a way that you are happy with, even if you need to ask for lots of help, so you can start getting some coding wins. Or you may feel a bit out of your depth to start with, but you aren't. Treat setup as an unusual time. If you do find a fix for a problem or a good article explaining a part of the setup, be sure to offer to document it for the next new starter, which will help you feel like you are positively contributing right from the outset. More experienced developers, you can really help here by making sure setup instructions are clear and simple to follow, and that they don't assume any knowledge at all. Think about pairing the new starter with another developer who has done the setup recently, ideally another early career developer. Not only will this build confidence in the other early career developer, but they will have a fresher knowledge of any problems encountered, and probably a similar hardware setup. It is also worth starting a list of handy code editor extensions like VS Code, Git commands, or keyboard shortcuts that you use on a daily basis to make your life easier, and leave them somewhere easy for the new starter to find so that they can come back to it when they're not feeling as frantic and confused as Elon Musk's business strategist. The workflow was totally new to me. I thought a Git fix-up was a terrible blind date. In their first few months on the job, early career developers will be entirely new to your company's professional coding workflow. This means they will be learning Git commands beyond adding and committing. For example, maybe Git rebase, Git fixup, Git squash, or Git merge, and learning how to create professional PRs and respond to code reviews by more experienced developers. Early career developers, it can be helpful to write yourself a cheat sheet or a flowchart and have it available on your desk so you can see your workflow easily as you get used to it. Tools like Miro can be helpful to visualize this. Find out early doors, or even before you start, if your company has a style guide for commits and commit messages, branch naming, and PRs, as many do, and this will spare the blushes of being caught committing with the message test, first commit, or does this work to the repository. Once you know which Git commands you'll be using frequently, you can add this to your alias file. If you're using ZSH, you can open the zsh.rb file and add aliases there. If you're using VS Code, enable the Git extension in the tabs to the left for a more visual way of interacting with everything Git. Learn how to review PRs and offer to take some simpler ones, or just make comments on pre-existing ones to start to flex your reviewing muscles. Although, if you are going to leave comments, perhaps check with the rest of your team first that this is okay with them to avoid unwanted opinions leading to unpopularity and no invite to the Christmas party. More experienced developers, it's helpful if you can create a simple-to-follow commit or PR style guide and make sure it's easy to find for the new starter. Also, this goes without saying, but try to be encouraging and gentle on PRs, particularly when they're starting out. We're told in teaching that the ideal positive to negative comment ratio should be 5 positive comments to 1 negative one. Including positive comments as well on lines you're impressed with or something you haven't seen before goes a lot further to creating a confident developer than, "What were you thinking? This syntax makes me want to throw up." Needing to run destroy all in the production console is scarier than the Saw franchise. Working for the first time with real data when you start your job can be intimidating. This is normal, and whatever you mess up, and you will mess something up in the production console at some point in your career, you can guarantee everyone else at your company has stories that are 10 times worse. Remember, too, that any work you do in your local database is not going to affect the actual real production data, so it's a good idea to clone, i.e. copy the data regularly, so you can try commands out in your local database or console first, just in case it has side effects that you didn't anticipate. If anything goes very wrong with your local database, you can always drop it and start again. But remember not to do this in production anymore, as that's another surefire way to lose that Christmas party invite. You can also experiment with tools like MySQL Workbench that allow you to write and run SQL queries on the database away from the code itself. More experienced developers, support your early career developer with how scary it can be when they start manipulating new data. Make it clear it's okay for them to run a line of code past you before they run it in the prod console for a sense check or a second pair of eyes. You could even make this standard procedure. And more importantly, be human in front of them. Tell them about times you've messed up so they can learn from your mistakes and stop viewing you as all-powerful, infallible four of the coding world, unless that's the work dynamic you like. Our new releases don't seem to be as hotly anticipated as Taylor Swift's. Chances are that unless you really went all out with your to-do list app that you learnt from a YouTube coding tutorial, you won't really be used to the release cycle of software yet, and that's totally okay. When we talk about your development environment, that means code that you write on your own laptop using a local copy of the database, which may have either cloned, or copied, or dummy data. No changes you make to this code will affect anything that users would see in your real app. Once your code has been reviewed and merged into the main branch in GitHub, most companies will promote first to a staging app for thorough testing of the code changes in a very similar environment before anything is finally promoted again to the real or production app, which users will see. Before code is merged, it also goes through the continuous integration process, which is a series of tests that need to pass before your changes can be added to the main branch. More experienced developers, you can help by writing an overview of any services you use for hosting or deployment and the workflow for this, so that an early career developer has a broad level understanding, even if they're not hands-on with the deployment process. You could even offer the early career developer the opportunity to watch you do a deployment, so they have tangible experience of the process and they know how their pieces of the puzzle fit in. A horse sits in a bar writing code. The barman asks, "Why the long code base?" I'll let that one sit for a minute. When early career developers work on a complex piece of software for the first time, they often find it hard to get to grips with the large code base. They can become fazed by the sheer number of files, and they will probably be newly meeting concepts such as modules and inheritance. They also won't always know how to tackle a problem or debug their own code. And sometimes advising them to just Google it won't help either, as they won't even be sure what to Google. Early career developers, take your time understanding what each line of code is doing, and don't feel pressured to push lots of code quickly and sacrifice your understanding of what the code is doing. Before you all scream, AI is going to steal our jobs, this is actually an opportunity to put ChatGPT to good use and paste any more complex lines of code in and ask it to explain. If you don't see where a method is defined in the file, it might be inherited from another file, so check the top of the class. Failing that, it might come from a gem. Google it to find out. Other search engines are available, and I'm not on commission, I promise. Take time reading the documentation of any gems you know are used or you've heard mentioned so you can understand what they are doing. If you run into a bug, don't worry, we all do. Take guidance from the seniors about how long they want you to stay stuck thinking for, which means out of ideas, not sure what other avenues to try, before you ask for help. Try rubber ducking the problem first, explaining it to an inanimate object to see if that unblocks you, and to help focus your Googling. When you do ask for help, explaining what you've already tried and what specifically you think is blocking your progress and understanding, and what line the error is on, will help show others in your company that you're eager to learn and you're putting in lots of effort. When you're making changes to a complex feature, you can sketch out flow diagrams in a notebook, or you can use tools like Miro to draw a visual representation of how the data is being passed around the different files. At this stage, though, your primary job is to learn and get familiar with the code, and the company will be expecting that of you. So make that your priority over 65 PRs every day. At this stage, your code editor tools are also your friends. I use VS Code, so I can talk more authoritatively about that, but I'm sure there are equivalents in whichever code editor you prefer. However, The big plus of VS Code is the live share feature, which will allow you to collaborate on code with other developers in real time and is great for pair programming. In VS Code, you can also use Command and P to search for a file and open it as a new tab, so you don't have to wade through all the files down the left-hand side to find the one you're after. Also, become best buddies with the search box at the side, which can be helpful for tracing back where else the method is called from in the codebase, or which file the text you can see in a particular view is rendered from. More experienced developers, what will really help here is keeping up-to-date documentation around some of the key parts of functionality in the app and how this might interact with the rest of the business, as this is really helpful for beginners getting up to speed with what they will be building and how their pieces of the puzzle fit in with the rest of the code base. Yes, it's definitely helpful for them to follow the code around and learn to understand a new code base, but some functionality and the business decisions behind it can be obscure, even if you understand exactly what the code is doing. This will also better allow them to spot bugs, gaps in requirements, and edge cases. This new language is all Greek to me. Many early career developers end up having to code in brand new languages in their first jobs. You're not alone in this. Even those that are coding with exactly the same stack that they learnt with will see differences that they find difficult and confusing. Again, as an early career developer, take your time to read existing code carefully, Googling any parts of the code you think might come from outside the company's code base, and don't be tempted to just churn out code quickly that you don't fully understand. More experienced developers, point your early career developer towards any training videos and resources that you found particularly helpful when learning the new language or framework. I know GoRails and Udemy have some excellent resources, and there may also be others. This is testing my code and my patience. Lots of early career developers find testing a new and unknown frontier, as chances are they will have been concentrating more on the basics of making working, nice-looking software when starting out, instead of protecting it against the 93rd obscure edge case that some product manager dreamed up over their cereal that morning. When you're starting out with testing, it's a good idea to search through the software for a similar feature to the one you've just built and copy that test file, changing some details in the test to apply it to your feature. If you find it difficult to write accurate tests before you start coding and code to the test in the test-driven development style, this is absolutely not a hard requirement in most companies. Just concentrate on getting your feature working first and worry about the tests after that. If you'd like a good resource to get you going, Jason Sweat is an excellent source of knowledge on all things testing in his social media and podcast appearances and meetups, as well as his excellent book, The Complete Guide to Rails Testing, obviously if you're working in Rails. I know this is the second shout out for Jason Sweat today, so Jason Sweat. More experienced developers, explaining exactly what needs to be tested as you task an early career developer with a piece of work can be really helpful, as well as providing some similar test examples that they can look at and apply to their own work. In summary, more experienced developers, if you don't already have one, please hire an early career developer. Chosen well, they will be so grateful for the opportunity. They will work hard and contribute well in a short amount of time. Even small contributions are incredibly useful and will free up your more experienced developers for harder projects. It can be hard to hire mid-levels and up, so why not grow your own in-house? Just add water, encouragement, and a couple of easy-to-action tips from the list previously, and you will have a great team member before you know it. Early career developers, the best thing you can do for your confidence at this point is remember that you're not alone. Getting involved in the Ruby community outside of your company will help remind you that there are plenty of other people in the same boat as you, struggling with the same things, and even who know even less than you do. International organizations like WNBRB or local coding chapters in your city are good places to start, as well as attending conferences like this one and listening to podcasts like Ruby for All, which is specifically aimed at beginners. Alternatively, you could mentor someone learning Ruby for the first time, or pick up your own mentor with firstrubyfriend.org. I hope this has been really useful for you all. Feel free to connect with me on socials and come and chat with me after the session if I can help in any way further. I'm grateful for you all for listening attentively to my talk. I can say wholeheartedly that you've been a much quieter and mostly better smelling audience than the rooms full of teenagers in my last career. Thank you so much.